All right. In this video, I want to talk about there being a false rapture before the actual rapture. And I'm going to get into why I think that's possible and probably going to happen. I think it's going to be an event that is going to help separate the wheat from the tares, and it's also going to actually sift the wheat to break off all the chaff and to purify us a bit and get us closer to God. I think something like that is needed because just over the past almost a year now, I've been listening to a lot of Christians talk about the rapture and that they think it's very close and they have very good reasoning for it. And a lot of things they say make a lot of sense. And they keep watching and getting my hopes up. And I was thinking about it. And I was like, you know what? These people have been watching big time for the last it's about 7 years, since 2014, since a lot of things started happening in the sun, moon, and stars, pointing to something going on. Uh, these people have been putting it out. Hey, something's going on. God's warning us. There's going to be a rapture and this tribulation's coming. So I started paying attention, and started listening to these people and focusing on the rapture, which is not something I usually never really put too much into, because my mindset is to just do God's work, God's will. And I don't mean do God's work for him, but I mean focus on sowing the seed, watering, working on myself, getting closer to God, clearing out all the false doctrine and all the things that I believe that are just things I believe because I never questioned it, or I just believe it because that's what I grew up with, or I believe it because I've been deceived, or I don't have all the knowledge. So I work on those things and try to get close to God and to know the doctrine, the truth, so that I won't be deceived and I won't deceive others. And that I can work with other Christians where we bounce things off each other and iron sharpens iron, where they may lift me up and I pick them up, and then I lift them up and then they pick me up, so that we keep getting to a higher level, getting closer to God as we strive for the truth and clean things up. And that's my goal. So the rapture is just something in my mind that if it happens, it happens. When it happens, right? You know, it's exciting and I'm looking forward to it, but at the same time, it scares me because of all the family and friends that I have that I don't think are saved and that they would have to go through the tribulation. So I'm not all this like, yay, I get to go home, because it's like, well, what about everybody else here? So when I listen to these people talk about the rapture, it kind of worries me a bit, because I'm looking at these Christians and compared to me, they seem very well off, and they don't like how the world's going, and they're like, I can't wait to get out of here and go home. And my mindset is, yeah, this world sucks, but you know what? I'll suffer here longer if my family and friends will get saved. I will live until, as old as I can get, 125, whatever, old and decrepit, as long as I can be used and I can suffer here to help others. That's what I want to do. I'm not saying it's going to be fun and I'm some kind of tough guy, but I don't want to go to heaven alone. I don't want to go to heaven without all my family and friends. And this world, even though, let's say I could live to 120 or older, it's a blink of an eye. That time's going to fly by, and then I get eternity with Jesus. So when I'm going home, that's forever. This is temporary. I'll suffer this temporary discomfort in hell for the sake of others. So when these Christians that they're getting made fun of a little bit, they're worried about what's going on with this jibber jabber and the boogeyman going around infecting everybody. They're seeming kind of soft to me, very soft, especially compared to what Christians have had to gone through history. We have it very easy. It's very easy, and we should not be complaining. We should just be getting to work because we know the time is short. We shouldn't be going, hey, the rapture's coming, let's get looking forward to it. Hey, party time. No. We should be go, okay, rapture's coming. Let's shine the light everywhere and get everybody going with us. That should be our focus. But that's why I think there would be a false rapture. Before I was actually saved, I was a Seventh-day Adventist preacher, and we believed that there would be a false rapture to fool all these people thinking that there is a rapture before the tribulation. Because Seventh-day Adventists believe that you go through the actual tribulation. And we learned about things like, over here, Project Bluebeam, where they would fake some kind of rapture, some kind of weird event, something like aliens, which is what a lot of people talking about the rapture are actually going to say that the government and the religions of the world are going to use to explain away why people were raptured and they weren't. They're going to say it was had to do with aliens, and they're going to bring aliens in, which are actually fallen angels, and they're going to come and deceive the world, right? But as a Seventh-day Adventist, I learned about how they would fake a rapture. And I was like, you know what? I think that's what they're going to do. I think they're going to fake a rapture because it will separate the wheat from the tares. Because I've been following this stuff for a while, and I know a lot of people are getting caught into it, thinking, hey, the rapture is close. This stuff looks like it's precursor to the mark of the beast. Tribulation's coming. So they're watching, right? They're watching. But this always happens. As a Seventh-day Adventist, I know the history of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, where it started with the Millerite movement, a Baptist preacher who predicted the fall of the Ottoman Empire using the time from Daniel. And he was saying, okay, the cleansing of the sanctuary is the cleansing of the world. That's when we're going to get raptured. Jesus is coming, right? And it didn't happen. And they call it the great disappointment, that he misunderstood what was going on, right? Well, I think something like that is going to happen again because it separates the wheat from the tares, the truly faithful and those who are going to follow God even when they make mistakes and they foolishly think something when it's not true. You see, the reason why I have this timetable up for a 7-year tribulation is because I'm not sure if it's 7 years. I think it might be 3.5 years. So all these people talking about Jesus crucified 28, 29 AD, that 7 years before that would be about 21, 22 AD. So 2,000 years later would be right now, 2021, 2022, which leaves 7 years for a tribulation to be 2028 or 2029 when it's all done and Jesus comes and reigns as king in Jerusalem here on earth. But if it's actually 3.5 years, we might have a false rapture pretty soon. And some of us as Christians who truly believe, we wouldn't get raptured, but what it's going to do is it's going to separate wheat from the tares, where all of us who are just following along just because we're scared, just because we're hoping to be taken, just because we're watching, we have faith in, not in Jesus and what he's done for us, but we just have faith that, because we're watching, we'll taken up, or something else, something like they think they're worthy because they see that the rapture's coming. They think that they're worthy of it because, they see it. They're around people who are telling them. They don't truly have the faith, and they're going to fall away when a fake rapture happens. And that, like I said, that separates wheat from the tares. Those who truly believe are going to find out, like, hey, why were we wrong about this? Right? What's going on here? How come they were raptured and we weren't, kind of thing. And if you realize, hey, Project Bluebeam, false rapture kind of thing, is to deceive you, to get you to fall away. But not only that, it's going to get you closer to God if you're a true Christian. So you're going to be sifted, where the chaff is going to be broken off from you, and you're going to be cleansed, sanctified, and perfected. So you're actually ready for the rapture, because you're going to use that time to get closer to God, to be like, hey, what's going on? And in that time you get closer to God, you're going to be perfected and purified to be a spotless bride for Jesus, right? So that's why I think it's going to happen. And why do I think that it might just be 3.5 years and not 7 years? Well, I was going through Daniel chapter 9, and it has the last week, Daniel's 70th week. There's 1 week left, and it does talk about it being cut off to the end of time, but I never saw it as 7 years. Like when people talk about a 7-year tribulation, and I would read Revelation, I was like, I never see this 7 years. There's talk about 3.5 years quite a bit. Times, and a dividing of time, 42 months, 1,260 days. It talks about 3.5 years in different ways, but it never says 7 years. So I was like, where did they get this 7 years? So I was in Daniel, and it's like, oh, the 70th week. But when I read that, I don't see that as the whole week is cut off to the end, right? And I'm going to explain that here, because I was actually listening to a fella who was saying the same thing. Like, I don't think the tribulation is 7 years. It seems like 3.5 years. There's nowhere in the Bible where we find the 7-year period. But I will say that God does work with sevens. Sevens is part of the completion. But usually the seventh, whether it's a 7th year, 7th day, is usually some kind of Sabbath, some kind of rest of some kind. So again, it could again be not 7 years. But he was saying, he was saying basically he sees the same thing that I see. So that's what I'm going to get into here to show that. In Daniel chapter 9, we read about Daniel's 70 weeks. And the 70th week is supposed to be the one that's cut off, right? And this is concerning the Messiah, the time the Messiah is going to come, right? So we say here, where should we start here? At verse 24, it says 70 weeks are determined, right? To make an end of sins and the reconciliation of iniquity and to bring in everlasting righteousness, right? And to seal up the vision and the prophecy and to anoint the most holy. So 70 weeks concerning what Jesus actually did, right? And it says here, know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and build Jerusalem unto the Messiah, the Prince shall be 70 weeks. In 62 weeks, the street shall be built, and the wall, even in troublous times. And after 62 weeks shall the Messiah be cut off, but not for himself. And the people of the Prince shall destroy the city and the sanctuary, and the end thereof shall be with a flood, and unto the end of the war desolations are determined. So here we got a picture of when the Messiah is coming, and then it says, and he shall confirm the covenant. So what is this covenant? The only covenant we got in the Old Testament is the covenant given at Mount Sinai, and then a promise of a new covenant. There's no depiction of the Antichrist making a covenant, but I'm not going to say that like it's set in stone, because there is talk about Israel's covenant with death, and it's being disannulled, right? But here at verse 27, it's tough to tell, is it talking about the Messiah confirming the covenant, or is it talking about this prince that's going to destroy the city? Because it's talking about the Messiah, and then as it's doing that, it mentions about what the prince is going to do, but it ends the sentence, and then it says, and he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. And in the midst of the week he shall cause the sacrifice and oblation to cease. And for the overspreading of abominations he shall make it desolate, even until the consummation, and that determined shall be poured upon the desolate. Now, if you look at this, and you say what a lot of people say, this he is the Antichrist. So he has to confirm a covenant with Israel for a week, which would be the 7 years. And in the midst of the week, so 3.5 years in, he causes the sacrifices and oblations to cease, right? Yet we need a temple for that to happen, and we need the sacrifices to happen, right? But if you look at this as Jesus, the Messiah, he confirms a covenant for 1 week. So when Jesus is 30 years old, roughly, he's baptized and he starts his missionary. His mission, I didn't mean to say missionary, but he starts his actual ministry. And he actually has his ministry for 3.5 years. So in the midst of the week, he causes the oblations to cease and for the overspreading of abominations, right? And he makes it desolate by first being the sacrifice to end all sacrifices, and then in 70 AD, because they rejected him as their sacrifice, Rome destroys Jerusalem, right? That could be a symbol of what the Antichrist is going to do. You know, I'm not saying that there's not going to be a third temple built and that there's not going to be sacrifices for 3.5 years. I'm just putting it together from where we are right now, how it looks. This looks a lot like the Messiah confirming the covenant with 1 week, because he confirms the covenant, the new covenant with Israel, through his ministry. 3.5 years in, he causes sacrifices to cease. You know, it's done. I'm the final sacrifice, right? And then 3.5 years after that, roughly, is when people, not everybody, depicts when Stephen was stoned and that everything's cut off to the Jews as a nation. You know, individual Jews can still be saved if they accept Jesus, but as a nation, they're kind of cut off, and the gospel is going out to the Gentiles. We see that transition happen in the book of Acts, right? So with this going on, the way I see it, because of what I'm going to read at the end here of Daniel, is that when Jesus is cut off in the midst of the week and causes the end of the sacrifices, that's when the 3.5 years is cut, and this last 3.5 years, right, the oblation is ceased, because what Jesus did, there's no more sacrifices. Jews don't offer sacrifices today, right? He caused it to cease. It's already ceased. This part is going to happen at the end. This is the 3.5 years that's cut off, because we are told in Daniel that there's this part cut off until the end of days, or the end of time, the end of the world. I don't remember the exact phrasing. I think it's the end of time. But here in Daniel chapter 12, it talks about Michael standing up, the great prince that standeth up for the children of thy people in troublous times, right? And he's going to deliver everyone that's found in the book of life. I'm talking about the people who are in the dust of the earth shall wake, some to everlasting life and some to everlasting contempt, right? And Daniel is like, hey, well, when is this going to be? He's like, hey, when is this going to be? And he says, for a time, times, and a half a time. This is 3.5 years, right? And he says right here, and he said, go thy way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed till the time of the end. So this 3.5 years is what's cut off to the end. It doesn't say 7 times or a week or 7 years or anything like that. It says 3.5. And then it actually gives a couple of depictions of some days which are interesting to study. But we see here the end is a 3.5 year period. And then over here in Revelation chapter 12, we see this again right here, where the woman flees into the wilderness for 1,203 days. With a 30-day month, that would be about 42 months, which is about 3.5 years. As it says here, times and a half a time, just like it says in Daniel. So time is a year, times is 2 years, half a time is half a year. 3 years, 3.5 years, right? And what happens right here? Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, right? What does Daniel say here about this end time with the 3.5 years? Michael's going to stand up and fight for the children of Israel, right? So we see that happening. This is the end, 3.5 year period. And what do we see happening right at the beginning of the tribulation? Let's check that out. This is the start. We read in Revelation chapter 2 and 3 about the church, and then Revelation chapter 4, the church is raptured, and then in chapters 4 and 5 we read about the church in heaven, and then we have Jesus opening up the seals. And what's the first thing that happens? A rider on a white horse. This guy is looking a lot like Jesus returning, right? As it depicts Jesus in Revelation 19 as coming on a white horse, but he doesn't have a bow, he has a sword coming from his mouth. This guy is white on a white horse with a crown, so he's trying to look like Jesus, but he has a bow, and he's going around conquering. This is the Antichrist who comes out after the church is raptured, right? This is Satan cast out of heaven, because what we just read here in Revelation chapter 12 is the woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, with upon her head the crown of 12 stars. That represents Israel, just like Joseph had a dream where the 12 stars bowed to him, or the 11 stars bowed down to him because they were his brethren. The stars represent the tribes of Israel, right? This woman represents Israel, as these things didn't happen to Mary. Just to clear that up for anybody who would put that in there. And then there's war in heaven, and the dragon is cast down, right? Well, we actually read that down here about the war in heaven. But this dragon wants to destroy the woman, wants to destroy Israel, right? But he's actually cast down, and he draws a third part of the stars with him. And the child is caught up, but the woman flees into the wilderness 4,203 days, 3.5 years. So there's no depiction of this 7-year tribulation. It's 3.5 years. We see the dragon is cast down, and he has a short time, right? So when he comes down as the Antichrist, he's no longer in heaven. What's going on here? He got, again, a time and a half a time to do what he has to do. It's shorter than this 7-year period. It's at 3.5 years. That's all the time he has, right? Which makes a whole lot of sense. I mean, when we look at it, like 1,000 years is a day, so we have a whole week where it's been about 6,000 years since Adam fell, and then we're going to have 1,000-year millennial reign of Jesus Christ here on earth as the Sabbath day, so 7,000 years of earth history. And we see Jesus being crucified in the midst of that week of 1,000 years, right? Let's say about 2,000 years ago, just about 3.5 years after, or 3,500 years after the fall. I'm not sure the exact dates and everything, but it's right around there, So we see that there's 2 periods broken up, 2 different periods. We have law and we have grace. But anyway, so we can see that Satan, who's going to be cast down, and he's going to have 3.5 years to actually do what he has to do, would make sense that 3.5 years before this happens, he has a false rapture to really push the idea of aliens and extraterrestrials in the minds of people, and to get people to doubt Christians who've been saying about this rapture. So it really breaks people away. We're going to have a really big falling away, and things are going to get worse. So then a rapture, if the end is in 2028, 2029, and there's a tribulation, it wouldn't be 7 years from that point, making it 2021, 2022. It would actually push it to about 2024, 2025. So it would be roughly between the springtime of 2024, and it could happen then, or in the fall of 2024, or in the spring or fall of 2025 is when the rapture would actually happen. That's if our dates are all lined up and Jesus was actually crucified around 2028, 2029. Then it would have been 2,000 years from that point. Then that lines up and makes sense. But uh, this is something good to get into and to study. If there is this 7-year period and you can see it clearly and you can explain it, please do so. I can admit that I'm wrong. Like I said, I don't see this clearly. I'm trying to put it together. And while hearing somebody else see the same thing I see, it just got me to relook into it and not just dismiss it and think, well, maybe I'm right, but maybe I'm not. But I can't quite put it together. But yeah, that is about that. So, look into it. Tell me what you think. And thanks for watching. Take care.